Hello, and welcome to this seminar on health and safety in churches. My name is Richard Newby, and I'm a Chartered Health and Safety Consultant with my HSE Manager Ltd. I've worked at all levels in health and safety, from carrying out risk assessments on a shop floor as a manager and a supervisor, to being a health and safety officer, health and safety manager, and eventually a health and safety and risk director for a large company employing over 2,000 people. I've been walking with the Lord for 14 years, and me and my wife came to the Lord together, and we attend a fellowship in Mansfield in Nottinghamshire. So, health and safety in churches. Now, you might be thinking, why a seminar of health and safety in churches? Why health and safety? It's for my workplace, it's for somewhere else. Well, I'm sure you'll agree with the recent events over the last 12 months with the COVID-19 pandemic. Risk is everywhere. And churches, as well as other sectors, must manage this risk and any other risk which falls under the regulations and the law regarding health and safety. Now, please be assured, I'm not trying to do a lecture on health and safety regulation, because I'm pretty sure that the stop button would be pressed pretty quickly on this seminar. I'm just trying to raise awareness that certain legislation does apply to churches as well as any other sector. So I hope I have your attention. So who's responsible for health and safety within your organisation? Is it the landlord? Do you lease a property? Is it the landlord's responsibility? Is it the safety advisor? If you have a safety advisor, would it be their responsibility? Is it the staff, the members of the public, the congregation? Is it their responsibility? Or is it the persons who have overall responsibility for the church and its premises? And the answer to that is, yes, it is. In general, as you would agree, everyone's responsible for health and safety. But overall responsibility lies with the leadership team of an organisation. Now, I'm sure you agree, risk is everywhere. Whether it's crossing a road, riding a bike, or having a hobby like scuba diving, hang gliding, or even playing a sport. Now, I have personal experience with this when I broke my leg in several places playing football, the sport that I love. Unfortunately, I can't do that anymore due to my injury and my age. But there's a risk associated with these activities that we love and willingly do, as there is with an organisation accommodating people and entertaining people like a church. So the definition of risk is the chance, high or low, that a hazard could actually cause somebody harm. As in churches, with comparison to, say, a chemical plant, the risk is relatively low. However, this still requires a level of risk management where there is a requirement to identify what could cause harm or illness, decide the likelihood of someone being harmed, take action to eliminate, reduce or control that risk. Now, examples of what's required to be covered when identifying and managing risks. I've broken this into two categories, which I've identified as generic that would apply to a church. So facilities management is the first category, and general health and safety management is the second category. So for facilities management, fire would be one that you would have to manage within a church. Now, I will cover these areas in further focus later. Asbestos, Legionnaires, again, I will cover these areas in further focus. Electrical systems, churchyard and perimeters, safe access and egress, heating and ventilation. It's not an exhaustive list, but these are things that are generic towards a church and its building. Looking at general health and safety management, obviously the COVID-19 pandemic, doing risk assessments for that risk within a church, especially when churches are beginning to open. Risk assessments for activities, events that a church is putting on. Manual handling, working with chemicals and substances, display screen equipment, lone working, first aid, food preparation, food hygiene, working with children and vulnerable adults, training. Again, very generic. I'm sure there'll be others, but these are the generic areas where some sort of risk management would have to be applied. Now, the level of risk in these examples could be low. However, an organisation must demonstrate that these are being assessed to reach this level of risk. So moving on to further focus. from a fire perspective. As you well know, fire is destructive and closes organisations temporary or forever. This recent event comes to mind just across the border from me in Derbyshire, where a church in Mackworth was destroyed by a fire and 1,000 years of history went up in flames. Now, following arson, the biggest causes of fire is electrical faults in a building. This is due to wiring not being inspected, tested, not been rewired for many years. So what would you need to do to manage fire risk within your organisation? Well, the first thing you would need to do is conduct a fire risk assessment. Now, please let me stress, competence is key here. Completing a fire risk assessment must be completed by a competent person who's got the skills, the knowledge and the experience to conduct a thorough fire risk assessment. Implement a fire evacuation plan. Now, I always look at this from a children's ministry scenario. So if you were a church, and hopefully when we get back to normal, church doors will be open and bursting at the seams and people will be coming in and worshipping the Lord and listening to the word, but their children will be being taught the word and worship in Sunday school. But imagine if the fire alarm was to be activated in a church where children are in ministry. The first thing a parent would want to do instinctively is to go and get their children. That's the first thing a parent would want to do. And in large services, this can be even more of a destruction to a normal evacuation procedure. So you must have an evacuation procedure for all persons to exit the building to ensure confidence to parents that their child or children are in safe hands and will be exited safely to meet them at the fire assembly point or a point of safety. Other areas of fire management will be fire alarm system, fire detection, fire extinguishers, and making sure that they're maintained, serviced and inspected and tested regularly and recorded. Training of staff and volunteers in fire safety awareness. And my HSE manager can support your organisation with this. So moving on to asbestos, further focus into asbestos. As you may know, asbestos was a good fire retardant, was used in building construction until it was finally banned in 1999 for its potential risks. There are regulations in place for organisations in non-domestic premises requiring duty holders to manage asbestos. This will be commissioning an asbestos management survey, if required, by a UCAS accredited organisation. The HSE Health and Safety Executive recommends that you use a UCAS accredited organisation for this work. So asbestos, where can it be found? It can be found in places where you probably wouldn't even realise, as you can see from this slide. But what does it mean for those who are responsible? So if you suspect you have asbestos in your building, then arrange for an asbestos survey to be carried out, again by a UCAS accredited provider. It may be that following the survey, your risk is relatively low, and asbestos can be managed without any further risk of exposure. Again, my HSE manager have got the resources to help your organisation with this. And further focus number 3 is Legionnaires. Now, Legionnaires can be deadly, as it's usually found in evaporative cooling systems, hot and cold water systems. Legionnaire risk management falls under legislation to ensure organisations manage and control the risks of exposure to this disease. So what would you need to do? The starting point for those responsible is to commission a Legionnaire risk assessment to assess the risks and obtain a detailed report of the risks and put control measures in place, if required, to manage this risk of exposure. Also, for those responsible managing this risk, an element of training is required to be completed. This is usually delivered by an organisation conducting the risk assessment and the report. As I said before, my HSE manager can support your organisation with this. So I've covered just a portion of areas that require a level of risk management. And I'm sure you're thinking, I have a church to run, I have support groups to run. It's a lot to take in, and it is. Now, I'm a practical health and safety professional. I understand how much this must feel. And I'm not someone who creates excessive paperwork for the sake of it. I believe in quality over quantity every time. but there's questions that you need to be asking yourself as a leadership team. Do you have the competent support required to manage health and safety within your organisation? Do we have the competent expertise to help you be compliant with the regulations required for managing health and safety? Do we have the relevant policies and arrangements in place for managing safety? As a leader or a leadership team, do you know your responsibilities towards health and safety? Are we currently breaching regulation within our organisation? Are we protecting our staff and our volunteers with regards to health and safety? And are our staff suitably trained? Now, if the answer is no to some or many of those questions, then please talk to me. Talk to us at my HSE Manager Ltd. We can be that competent person. We are that competent person. Now, I was recently auditing a church over the last couple of weeks that has been open through the pandemic and have managed the COVID pandemic very well. Been open since just after the first lockdown, and they've been, as I said, managing their COVID-19 risks very well. And I was doing an audit at this church. You'll see from the photograph, this is what I found in this church. Now, what struck me was that someone thought that this was okay to plug into a wall. Would you have noticed this? Now, the concern came to me was that this was found in a children's creche, and we all know what children are like with their fingers when they want to go on an investigation. And this church is improving its health and safety on a regular basis. So there's always room for improvement. If you're looking for support in health and safety and want to talk to anyone regarding any issues you have, then please talk to us. The number is on the seminar, the email is there, and the website. Please talk to us. Many thanks for your time on this, and God bless you all.
Nothing beats sitting on it, hearing it, tasting it, wearing it, handling it, trying it, comparing it.
The copier produces 1,000 copies for £4. The Riso digital printer produces 1,000 copies for £1.20 at 140 pages per minute.
Discussing it.
The interesting thing about this centre is it's a very difficult breed on a very small site.
Buying it. Recommending it. I definitely recommend it.
It's always good to have resources, and yeah, this is very resourceful, so it's a great place to be.
Nothing beats being here. Buy your tickets online now. creonline.co.uk/tickets.